Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Hello and welcome to the London part of the show. I'm Anushka Astana. Joining me for the duration, the man just appointed to breathe life into the Conservative Party machine in London, Wimbledon MP Stephen Hammond, and the Labour MP for Hammersmith, Andy Slaughter, former leader of Hammersmith and Fulham Council and until recently Labour's shadow housing minister. Welcome to you both. Plenty of water, should you have a frog in the throat. Now, last week, Ben Page of pollsters Ipsos Mori reminded us that housing is the #1 concern for Londoners. So let's start with the house building policy initiative that the Prime Minister announced in her conference speech. A solution to London's housing shortage, or too little, too late? Tanjil Rashid has more.
The Prime Minister told the country this week that she would dedicate her premiership to the British dream. What does that entail? Well,
that means fixing our broken housing market.
Her solution? To build a new generation of council housing.
I can announce that we will invest an additional £2 billion in affordable housing, taking the government's total affordable housing budget to almost £9 billion. And in those parts of the country where the need is greatest, allow homes to be built for social rent well below market level, getting government back into the business of building houses.
Although London wasn't specifically named, that need is arguably greatest here in the capital, where council waiting lists number almost 250,000 people. One council that will be bidding for some of that money is Hammersmith and Fulham. Its Labour leader said it was far from enough to build the new generation of council housing that Theresa May proclaims.
All it will do is deliver 20,000 social rented homes across the country. Now, you put that into context that A, London needs 35,000 homes a year to deal with the housing crisis, and B, they're spending 10 billion on Help to Buy. Now, at the very minimum, they need to have a separate housing policy for London, and they need to at least be spending the same as what they're spending on Help to Buy.
Labour-run City Hall hope the funding will add to the 3.1 billion the government have already allocated to build affordable homes in London. But they say councils aren't getting the powers that they really need.
One of the calls that councils in London and indeed across the country make very often is around lifting their borrowing limits on investment so that they can invest more in building new housing for people who live in their area, and they really need those extra powers and resources from central government to really be able to step up to the challenge that we face.
According to pollsters, Londoners say their #1 issue is housing. No doubt the Prime Minister will find out what they made of her announcement in the council elections in May.
So, Stephen, that really set out the scale of the problem. Almost 250,000 people on waiting lists in London. Theresa May said she was going to build a new generation of council homes, 20,000 across the country.
The leader, the Hammersmith and Fulham leader, obviously didn't understand the numbers, which is not surprising. Actually, what it is, of course, is the fact it's adding to the 9 billion that's to make it 9 billion in total. That's on top of already some of the other announcements. And so, of course, this is a major crisis. We need to make sure we're getting this right, which is why it is the key priority of this government. And it's a range of tenures. One of the great things that Philip Hammond did last year in his budget was allowing the housing associations to set tenure free. And my housing associations in my area have already said to me that actually by 2 billion, for every billion or every pound the government puts in, you get another 6 from housing associations.
But City Hall are calling it tinkering around the edges.
Well, City Hall need to wake up. Where has the mayor been? He's talked the talk in the last year. Boris built 100,000 social homes and affordable homes in his period of time. The mayor has built none in his 18 months. The London Land Commission has gone to sleep under this mayor. The fact of the matter is Londoners are being let down by the London mayor at the moment.
But people think there needs to be something transformative. Why don't you allow councils to borrow against their assets?
Well, some councils are getting on and doing it. Wandsworth Council has got a process of building councils already. They're going to build 11,000 council homes over the period out to 2022. Why aren't other councils matching matching that.
Would you change the rules on borrowing?
Yes, you have to. This is a crisis which is largely happened on the Tories' watch. This is so dishonest. We're talking about an additional 5,000 council homes a year. That only looks good compared to the 1,000 social homes a year the Tories are building at the moment. It doesn't look very good compared with the 40,000 Labour was building in its last year in office, or the 100,000 we would have been building a year by the end of this Parliament.
Well, you say that, but Labour didn't have a great record either. I mean, you led a council. What is the key to getting this going in London?
The key is using every tool you have, whether it's the planning process, whether it's brownfield sites, whether it's giving away land at subsidised prices to do that. All that this does is it's a pretend policy, I'm afraid. This is tiny numbers. It's an increase of 0.02% in the housing stock in the country each year. It's very dishonest. And the most dishonest thing about it is that the Tories have caused this crisis in social housing since they began Right to Buy without replacing, but they've also cut, in 2010 they cut by 60% the capital investment in council housing. In Hammersmith, we were talking about Hammersmith in the film, when the Tories were in power, they sold off council houses as they became vacant. There's been a deliberate policy to destroy social housing as a type of tenure, and this doesn't scratch the surface of reversing that.
And Stephen, you obviously disagree with that, but Theresa May did sort of sell this in advance as this new generation of council homes. Does that mean there is more policy that we can expect imminently?
Well, I think it's part of a process, and Theresa May quite rightly sold it as the new generation of housing that we need for all types. We need social affordable, we need buy-to-rent, we need social ownership, and we need council housing. We need all of those tenures. And some of that is happening through the housing associations as well, and some of it through council housing. And I agree with Andy, actually, on one thing. That
it
would be sensible to look at the borrowing powers to allow some of the councils to get on.
OK, so you both think that that's quite an important move?
It would be an important move. But I don't think Andy poo-poos a lot of things. The reality is that under the Conservatives, when we were controlling the mayoralty, there were 100,000 extra affordable homes in London. That's simply true, Andy, and he can't get away from that.
If you agree in changing the borrowing rules, have you told Theresa May this? I mean, why don't you get on with it?
Well, because things happen in processes in government.
You're in government.
We're in government. We're looking at, and we recognise that this is the key priority. Philip Hammond made a number of very important announcements.
Is it inertia?
No, it's not inertia. Philip Hammond made a number of key announcements in his last budget. He absolutely recognised that, along with the Prime Minister. And I'm expecting to see enough further announcements.
Andy, shouldn't you be welcoming more money for social housing, even if it's not as much as you want?
Well, I've said it's better than the fact. Only by their appalling standards at the moment is this any better. But let me be clear, they have had this massive attack on council housing. Boris Johnson, we've just heard referred to, he changed the definition. So social housing rents are typically about 25% to a third. He changed the definition of affordable housing, so it was 80% of market rents. The houses he was building weren't affordable to anybody on low or middle incomes. That's the dishonesty.
But the promise that you're making, how are you going to pay for it? That's what people want to know.
Well, it was in the manifesto. If Stephen
some would say it wasn't costed.
The manifesto, unlike the Conservative manifesto,
the IFS said it.
The IFS said it wasn't costed. Actually, you can't get away with that. That's using your own people.
And by the end of the Parliament, 100,000 new social rented homes a year. Those are the sort of volumes we need, not 5,000 a year.
OK, well, let's stay with housing, because council housing also featured prominently at the Labour conference. Jeremy Corbyn said council regeneration plans should benefit existing residents and that they should be balloted before any housing redevelopment takes place. But has this commitment set him against Labour-led councils in the capital? Bhavani Vadi reports.
Galinda Ganivos bought her one-bedroom flat at Cressingham Gardens in 2011. A year later, Lambeth Council announced its intention to regenerate the estate. Since then, she and other residents have been campaigning for their existing homes to be refurbished rather than demolished and rebuilt, which is the council's preferred option.
It doesn't matter what we say to the council, how we feed back to the council. They just don't listen. It's just disempowering, the whole process. We've been asking for a ballot since 2012, and the council has refused. So this is quite hopeful that if Labour is now saying we should be giving residents a ballot, that is very positive news. However, Lambeth Council here is a Labour council, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
We approached the council for an interview on camera, but were given a statement instead. Lambeth Council wouldn't comment specifically on the issue of resident ballots, but did say that their plans for redeveloping their estates, as well as their key guarantees to tenants and leaseholders, were drawn up after extensive and lengthy consultations with residents. Other Labour-led councils have made their position on resident ballots clear. Southwark Council says it's carefully considering introducing ballots for future regeneration projects. By contrast, Haringey Council has rejected the idea and said it does not expect to start using yes-no ballots. Dr Paul Watt has written about what he calls state-led gentrification, where council regeneration projects result in the net loss of social housing and an increase in private housing for sale or rent at prices out of the reach of low-income Londoners, meaning they're forced out of an area. He believes resident ballots could help stop this trend.
That residents feel on estates is that there's a democratic deficit. They are not properly, meaningfully engaged in this process. I think that what's happened is the attention has been focused on the needs, the wants, etc., of kind of like young professionals, rather than the thousands of people then who are on social housing waiting lists, the people in temporary accommodation, etc., etc.
But the Mayor of London's draft Good Practice Guide to Estate Regeneration urged caution around using ballots or votes, saying they can risk turning a complex set of issues into a simple yes-no decision.
Even if you do support ballots, you want to make sure you have other ways of engaging people as well. You don't want to just have a ballot and that's the only way you engage people. You want to make sure that people are engaged really early on, they're engaged as the proposals are iterated and improved and changed over time, and that people have lots of different ways of getting involved. So clearly ballots have a big role to play, and they'll feature in the final version of the guide. But what we've been doing over summer is consulting very thoroughly and very widely to take on board all of these views.
The Conservative housing spokesman at City Hall believes ballots should be a prerequisite to prove regeneration plans have residents' support.
I want the Labour Party to stop squabbling amongst itself and come up with clear plans for consultation. And I think those plans have to include balloting people to find out whether or not their consent is for these regeneration schemes.
Critics fear that granting residents' ballots could prevent the construction of much-needed housing. But Galinda says that giving residents like her a vote would help deliver regeneration that meets the needs of existing communities, rather than driving them out.
Andy, it doesn't feel as if we're getting a very unified stance from Labour. Jeremy Corbyn clearly very much in favour of this, but some London Labour-led councils not, and City Hall another position again. I mean, what should people living on these estates expect? Well,
the Mayor, as you heard from James Murray, is consulting on this, and he made the sensible point that you need to do a quite very detailed... These are not yes-no answers often, and you need detailed consultation. But let's remember how we got to this state. We talked about the housing crisis and the real lack of homes. What Labour councils in particular are doing is trying to create new homes, and some of those will be created on existing land. But part of that problem is that the government hasn't come up with the brownfield sites, the other public sector-owned sites which are needed, which will be the point of first call. So I understand why, and I've been involved in regeneration schemes myself. The problem I always have is at the end of the day, these are people's homes. You wouldn't have private streets being demolished without people having if you like, a final say on what happens. And I've experienced this in a very harsh way in my constituency, where the previous Tory council sold for virtually nothing a piece of land with 750 good quality affordable homes on it. That was 10 years ago. Okay. At the moment,
Stephen, do you recognise that?
Let me just finish that, because nothing's happened with those homes. So those people have lived in limbo for 10 years, and yet up to 90% of them at any one time have said they don't want the redevelopment to go ahead.
Do you recognise that?
What do I recognise? Well, I don't know the specifics of that piece of land. What I do recognise out of Andy's statement is the first thing is, of course, more brownfield and public sector land should have been brought about, which is exactly the point I was making. The failure of this mayor to do so is actually staggering and having a big impact on house building in London. Secondly, unless you do the proper consultation with residents beforehand, most people don't like change, and so the most likely consequence of this policy is less houses being built in London. Residents should be consulted.
Okay.
and residents should be asked. But it shouldn't be a simple yes/no ballot as Corbyn was suggesting.
So you disagree with the Conservative housing spokesman who we heard there?
He actually, if you listen to him carefully, he said before any ballot there should be extensive consultation. And indeed there should, so that people could understand that they'd like to get better quality homes. There could be the chance for more homes to be built on estates. And a lot of people will vote for that, as they are doing in my area, in an area which is being regenerated around South Wimbledon.
Why shouldn't people have a say? I mean, your leader talks about social cleansing. Do you recognise that in some of the regeneration projects that you've talked about?
The scheme I've just talked about, you're knocking down 750 genuinely affordable homes, some for rent, some have been bought, and you're building 8,000 luxury homes up to 30 stories high with not one additional social home.
And you mentioned a Conservative-led council, but very clearly there are Labour-led councils that don't agree with Jeremy Corbyn's policy, like Haringey in the video.
I mean, I'm not clear from what Stephen said.
Presumably this development got planning permission under a Labour council in Hammersmith.
No, sorry, Stephen, but it's a very famous case, West Kensington Estate, the Earls Court development area, which is in Stacey. It's called a combination of a greedy developer and Tory politicians who do whatever developers would say, have put thousands of people into limbo for 10 years. That's why I think, in the end, that the existing residents do have to have the biggest say in this matter. It's their homes. It's
OK, so they need to have a say. And how do we stop, Stephen, regeneration essentially pushing lower-income Londoners out?
Well, by having a say, but also by making sure that we're having proper consultation in front of that. Otherwise, I think what will happen is complete inertia in London and no more houses being built. And there is an onus, I think, to actually make sure that the regeneration plans are properly explained. In most cases, far from what Andy's describing, in most councils I know of, actually what happens is as many affordable houses and houses for rent at that tenure are being built. In the schemes that are involved in my area, they are. And more important, let's go back to the fundamental point. This mayor is failing to deliver on affordable houses and he's failing to deliver on land in London.
Great.
And this is a key problem for Londoners.
Last week, I was with James Murray, 600 new homes in my constituency, 40% affordable. It's absolutely wrong.
Okay.
This mayor is doing exactly the right things on housing.
All right.
Where is the London Land
We'll come back to it. On that note, last week we looked at the state of the Conservative Party in London and the challenges it faced in restoring its political fortunes in the capital. The prescription from one senior London Tory: rebuild the party machine.
They've done the right thing. They've appointed a vice-chairman, a London MP, Stephen Hammond, vice-chairman for London. But he needs the executive power to deliver. He needs a unit and a team from which he can build a campaigning organisation across London, but also directly influence the policies and solutions that Londoners need.
Stephen, what happened to the Conservatives in London?
What a wise man.
You agree with him?
Well, yes, I do agree with him. And I agree with him in actually his prescription, not necessarily the person chosen, but I don't want to be too immodest. But, I mean, the fact of the matter is right. We had a bad election in London. If you look 10 years ago, we were on the ascendant in London, great council results, the mayoralty, and we had a bad election in London. And I think part of that is challenging us to think why. So we need to consider very carefully and think through why the messages that we had in our manifesto and the messages we had in the manifesto of 2015, which were more successful, didn't play through.
And there's a young population, ethnic minorities. Are you going backwards with these groups? Well, what does the party need to do? David Cameron thought a lot about how to reach out to ethnic minority voters. Has that slipped now?
Well, I think it's slipped in the last 2 years. So clearly, Nick mentioned in that report the need for thinking inside the party and a campaigning organisation. It will be no surprise to you that I've already been working with a number of people to correct and readdress a number of those issues. I'm expecting that we'll be making some substantive announcements on that by the end of the month.
Oh, OK, and none that you want to share with us now, I presume?
I think that would be wise. I don't think that would be wise.
You're always welcome. And I suppose the other big looming issue on Brexit, London was in a very different place to other parts of the country. Some people would say that Theresa May's language has alienated Londoners. Have you been doing things internally to try to change the tone?
Yes, of course. And I think the Prime Minister's Florence speech and also the offer, which I hope will soon get a solution on between both sides. But the Prime Minister's tone has been helpful. We've seen London leaders writing directly to a number of residents to reassure residents that they'll be welcome in London. They're always welcome in London, and there will be a solution. We've also got a number of council leaders doing exactly the same thing. OK, and
Andy, Labour have clearly done very well in London, attracting a younger audience, attracting ethnic minorities, perhaps attracting the anti-Brexit vote and to some extent affluent voters. But is there a risk that Labour gets out of touch with the rest of the country? It almost feels like there's a bit of a divide now as a result of that.
No, I think that actually the London message is spreading to the rest of the country, which is that basically British people don't like the Conservative Party or its policies, and it's not. Seems a genial fellow, but he ain't going to turn that round.
More people voted for the Conservatives than Labour in the election.
The problem is, and this is particularly true in London, that if you particularly talk to young people, what they don't like the cost of housing, they don't like 0 hours contracts, they don't like the fact there's no proper minimum wage for them, but they equally don't like the policies the Tories do champion, this fetish with Brexit, this fetish with immigration, that doesn't appeal to a London audience at all. Stephen, you've got your work cut out here, I'm afraid.
Well,
you have to change your policies. You can't just change the face of the country.
The good news is that I have a party in London, a Conservative Party, that's willing to get up and fight because they see
You've got no members.
Well, that's not true. Of course, we have members in London, and we have plans to increase the membership. Yeah,
Is there a risk that your members might be more attracted to George Osborne than Theresa May?
The key thing for members in London at the moment is to make sure that we do very well and retain and increase the number of boroughs we hold at next year's election.
Good luck with that.
There's a clear priority to actually make sure that we then spread the message in areas where we don't have councillors at the moment. And as you rightly pointed out to Andy, it's all very well for him to say the Labour Party message is spreading through the country. Didn't spread that very well.
Well,
they added 20 seats. We polled 6% more in the polls than they did.
Have a look at by-elections
and to be
see
fair,
which way the lines are going.
We're talking about London here, though, aren't we? So let me ask you, because this is a tough job that you've been given. Would you have accepted it if it had been offered to you after Theresa May's conference speech?
Of course, because absolutely and entirely, because I am firmly believe that actually it is the Conservative Party that does better for communities. If you look across London, it's Conservative council delivering.
How damaging was it for her? I mean, has Grant Shapps been on the phone to you?
Grant, I don't know who Grant's been on the phone to.
Are you on the 30?
I'm certainly not one of the 30, and I don't know who Grant's been on the phone.
So the Prime Minister has your full support?
Definitely.
She has Andy's full support. Does she have yours full support?
And Jeremy Corbyn has our full support because he won't be there very much longer either. He's just about to, everything that Jeremy Corbyn said is just about to fall apart.
Are you comparing Jeremy Corbyn's position to Theresa May's with regards to the MPs?
No, I was merely comparing my position with Andy's. Andy said he hopes Theresa stay there. I hope Theresa stays there because she's going to provide the right leadership for this country.
And what do you need her to do? What should she do right now after a very difficult few days?
I think she's going to come out and prove calmly and clearly that we're going to carry on with the domestic policies we need to govern. We're going to address the housing crisis, and she will get the deal for Britain.
As her leader, you had a disastrous by-election result in Richmond. You've lost Battersea. Justine Greening only just held on to Putney.
But we won back Richmond.
You lost Kensington. Just about run back. She's giving a difficult message to Londoners for the Conservative Party. Do you have to distance yourself to the leadership?
We have to make sure that we recognise that we get the party in sync with the metropolitan values and metropolitan ambitions. Housing is the key to that, and the Conservative solutions with that.
And how important is Brexit for you? I mean, Labour's position, some say, is confused on Brexit.
My voters understood absolutely which party you need to vote for if you oppose the Tories' hard Brexit. It's economically suicidal. London will not put up with it, and I'm afraid Stephen's doing the best he can, but he ain't going anywhere.
Thank you both very much for joining us. That's all we have time for.